This podcast is sponsored by valleygivesback.org. What will you be remembered for? Name a Valley nonprofit in your estate plan and create a legacy that tells future generations what mattered to you. Making a gift that costs nothing during your lifetime is easy and revocable if things change. With a planned gift, you have the power to impact the Valley forever without affecting your current lifestyle. Your action inspires others to make a difference in their own way. Remember the Valley. Ask your accountant, financial planner, or attorney about planned giving options. Plan now. Give later. Impact tomorrow. Learn more at valleygivesback.org.
For hundreds of years we've brought you the news. Printed the info, we gave you the clues. Owners' profits were always sky high. Changing market now threatens our lives. Post-literation, critical reading, dumbed down nation, signs have been breeding. TV sucking ideas from our head. Public discourse just about dead. We'll ride the dinosaur. Yeah, ride the dinosaur.
Hello, I'm Eugene Driscoll of valleyindy.org. Welcome to Navel Gazing, the Valley Indy podcast. Today's episode is experimental and unstructured because I'm venturing out of the local news zone, people. I apologize in advance. My guests today are two people I went to school with growing up in Somers, New York. I decided to have them on here because the New York Times recently featured my hometown of Somers, New York in a Living Here article. The town comes across as wealthy, whimsical, and wonderful. Westchester County, New York to its core. But I thought it would be interesting to talk to two people who've lived in the town for some 40 years apiece to get their reaction to the article and to react to the reaction they're seeing from their neighbors. I was curious as to whether they thought the world's best-known newspaper accurately captured their community. The short answer is they did not. We end up talking about what we found out, or when we found out, we were from the, quote, poor, unquote, section of Somers. And Shannon, an author, and someone I haven't had a conversation with since we graduated high school in 1992, talks about not fitting in growing up in Somers, New York, and being badly bullied growing up there, and how those experiences still are with her. But first, yes, this is Valley Indy. We are a local news site, and this podcast is sponsored by valleygivesback.org, by the way. There's a lot going on in the Valley, so here's a rundown of some local news happenings. First, I received an email last week, or maybe 2 weeks ago, from the State Education Department saying the scheduled inquiry in front of the State Board of Education to look at whether the city of Ansonia improperly cut the school budget was pushed to February 6th. It had been scheduled for January 3rd, but from what I was told, the city government and the school district are in mediation in connection to their court case. That's the one that the Board of Education has pending against the city concerning what the school district says is an illegal and improper budget cut. Next scheduled court date is October 2019. But obviously an agreement could be hammered out perhaps well before then. Second, Derby Mayor Richard Zekin has scheduled a State of the City address for Wednesday, January 16th, 10 a.m., Derby City Hall. I believe that's the first Derby State of the City address in at least 10 years. I don't remember one happening on my watch, unless I slept in or something. Third, okay, this is a doozy. The Representative Policy Board of the South Central Connecticut Regional Water District is holding a public hearing 7 p.m. Thursday, January 17th at the RWA headquarters, 90 Sergeant Drive in New Haven, on a proposal to build a 1 million gallon water tank in the city of Derby. This is something the Regional Water Authority has been trying to do for years. They say that the water pipes in Derby are old and unreliable. There's water pressure problems in West Derby, specifically the danger according to the Regional Water Authority, is that if you have a fire that's taxing water use, you could have a complete failure of the water system in West Derby. So first they tried to build a water tank on top of what's called Telescope Mountain. That was met with widespread opposition from neighbors and city government eventually. Right now they're looking at the woods across from the former Varka building in West Derby, Coon Hollow Road, Coon Hollow and Chatfield. Basically, there's a patch of land, an acre or so, between the entrance to the Derby Middle School, high school entrance and Coon Hollow Road. And it's a complicated deal. The city is basically looking for the Regional Water Authority to purchase some land that's owned by a church, an Ansonia church. And then the city will give or lease, I believe it is, for $1. I shouldn't get that into the details because it's not, I don't remember it. But basically it's sort of a swap that's going on. And the city also wants to buy some open space as a part of this deal on the other side of town. I'll write about it this week. I've had the information forever and I just haven't had a chance. But there is a public hearing. This is a 50-foot tall water tank, 1 million gallons. Proponents say it's needed as a public safety measure. There are at least 2 people who appeared at a Board of Aldermen meeting a month or 2 ago saying, no, the land is deed restricted. We need some open space in West Derby, and this is a bad idea, and they should look elsewhere. Okay, and then finally, the Derby Town Clerk's Office is continuing efforts to collect items for the St. Vincent de Paul Food Pantry on Roosevelt Drive in Derby. This is an ongoing effort that's been going on, I think, 2 years or so. This month, that is January 2019 as I record this, they're looking for hamburger, tuna, or chicken helper. If you can help, drop off your items in the town clerk's office. That's in the first floor of Derby City Hall at 1 Elizabeth Street. Oh, and by the way, Happy New Year, everyone. Okay, so here's a podcast recorded late one night, a Saturday night, where myself and 2 people talk about what it's like to have your hometown featured in the New York Times. And I'm a little nervous about this one. I just want to say I probably come across as really bitter. I don't think I do a necessarily good job making my points. But I just want to say that I think Somers, New York is a great place to live and to raise a family specifically. And if I could afford to live there, I would in a heartbeat. That being said, the New York Times article is superficial trash. Okay, here we go. I don't know. Maybe. All right, you guys ready to go?
Yep.
Yeah.
Here we go. Listen, I woke up in a foul mood this morning. I couldn't sleep. And I found myself the night before watching Norm Macdonald interviewing Super Dave Osborne from a few years back. No relation to the Osbornedale State Park here in Derby. Anyway, I wake up. It's like 4 a.m. I log onto my Facebook account, and I see a person commenting on a New York Times article I had posted the night before. I don't even remember what the exact New York Times article was about, but the person said something along the lines of, I'd love to read that article, but my monthly limit is up. Because the New York Times has a paywall and all that, so you only can read like whatever it is, 5 articles a month. Anyway, a guy gets on my page. Now, mind you, I'm a reporter, like a nothing reporter, like a pimple on a flea's butt local news reporter, but I'm still a reporter. And this guy proceeds to explain on my Facebook page how to get the New York Times article for free. And it ticked me off to no end. I was just like livid. Just like my brain exploded right there, and I could feel my blood pressure rise, that kind of sand behind the eyeballs feeling. Because judging by this guy's personal Facebook page and all his hot tub photos, he can afford a subscription to the New York Times. I have one, I have one. I'm not making a killing doing what I'm doing for a living by any means. Anyway, so I post on my Facebook thread, pay for the damn news. That's it. I wanted to say a lot more, but I just said pay for the I might have thrown an F-bomb out there too. But I figured we went to high school together, me and this guy. But I'll get to that in a second. So my point is, we just laid off a guy here at the Valley Indy. So I'm particularly prickly when people and businesses and everybody wants something for nothing. They don't want to pay for professional journalism or semi-professional journalism or whatever the heck it is I do. They don't want to support their local democracy by buying a cheap $100 ad, $90 ad. They'll actually be seen by people. So I wrote, pay for the damn news again. And then the guy's reply was long. He obviously taken 5 minutes to think about this. And it made me think of where I grew up. And it's the same place my two guests today grew up and call home, Somers, New York. So before we go any further, I want to welcome to the program Brian Spears, my oldest, literally oldest. He's old, and he's getting older every day. He's got a birthday coming up. A special effects makeup artist from Somers, New York. Still calls Somers his home. Welcome to the podcast, Brian.
Hello.
And it's your umpteenth appearance. And secondly, I want to grant or give, I don't know how, I'm sorry, I'm awkward. Warm welcome to Shannon Houston, another fellow classmate of 1992 Somers High School. Welcome to the program, Shannon.
Hello.
Now, Shannon, right before we went on the air, I used this magical device called Google. So I'm going to read your bio, or at least what I put together as a bio. A professional would have actually emailed you and asked you for a bio, but I don't do that. Shannon was born in Boston, Massachusetts, something I didn't know. But she grew up in Somers, New York. And I'm going to say Shenorock specifically.
Yes.
She attended the State University of New York College at Potsdam, graduating with a BA in English. I'm sorry, look, I blew that. English, writing, and social. You got 3 degrees? How many degrees do you have, Shannon?
I had 2 majors. Yeah, I had 1 degree, 2 majors.
All right. So what is it? English, writing, and sociology?
Yes, 2 useless majors.
You're talking to a mass comm guy here, so don't worry about it. She mainly uses these locations as a setting of her novels, because what I haven't mentioned is Shannon is an author. What did Shannon write? Wait, I cut that part out. She wrote a bunch of articles, or I'm going to have to edit this again. Shannon, what are some of the novels you have written?
Well, my first novel was about my experiences being bullied in the Somers school system. It's called The Playground. I call it a novel because I actually had to come up with a lot of stuff. Like dialogue, I had to reinvent dialogue because I don't remember. I was 11. So even though I remembered certain things, I had to, come up with dialogue, and I actually consolidated several characters into one, so I couldn't call it a memoir because it's not completely true.
But the feelings are there. The feelings are there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, and you know what I loved about your bio, because now I found it again. I apologize for
That's fine.
for messing that up. But at the age of 8 years old, Shannon enjoyed a brief interlude of local notoriety when she won the Best Fairy Tale of the Year at Primrose Elementary for The Poison Tulip, which she had written and illustrated herself. The story was published in the North County News, our local newspaper, which no longer exists. And for a short period of time, she enjoyed a taste of fame. And I have that triggered vague memories. I was probably angry at you that you beat me out.
You were in that class.
Yeah. Was it
class.
Mrs. Attridge, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, I was like, "Damn, Shannon beat me." I probably ripped off the plot of The World According to Garp and tried to morph it into a fairy tale, because that was a.
Well, I still remember that article had a picture of you.
Really? Why?
From our Laura Ingalls Day, it had a picture of you in old-fashioned clothing.
Oh yeah, I vaguely remember that. Yeah, I have that photo. Wow, that's wild. Now, Brian wasn't involved in any of this because he spent his 3rd grade in juvenile detention. Isn't that right, Brian?
Weren't you in St. Joseph's?
Well, that wasn't until 4th or 5th grade. I went to Primrose.
Oh, I remember you as being a bad kid.
I mean,
Not in high school. In high school, you were not, but in elementary school, I remember the aides always yelling at you, always having you cornered on the playground, yelling at you about something.
Yeah, I guess it'll be in my next memoir.
Well, here's the thing about some of the aides. I was just thinking the other day, it's just weird.
But you were all somebody's mom, so I was probably really mean.
Well, here's the thing. Some of those moms weren't so nice themselves looking back, because I was thinking, I have, I have 2
They weren't
kids.
like the housewives that are in Somers now.
Is that
Most
well?
of the mothers then had half mustaches.
Whoa! Now
That definitely doesn't happen now. They all dress like that, one of those.
My
models.
old man ran a nursing home there in Somers, and now he's the first cop in charge, whatever the heck it's called. I remember at one point I had this one aide in the intermediate school actually would make comments about me all the time, about how I looked, about how my hair was. Yeah, dude. And it's actually somebody we know. We actually we know her son, and what happened was, I guess my father had either fired the husband or something like that, and she took it out on me. Yeah. So, I don't know. You grow up thinking these people are like heroes, but some of them were just lousy and rotten. But anyway, that brings us to the topic here now. This is a weird navel gazing because we're not talking about the lower Naugatuck Valley. But I don't know. This long post that this classmate of ours put on my Facebook page just made me think about Somers in general. And then on top of all this, Somers was just featured. Somers, New York, not Summers, as they say it in Connecticut. There's a Summers on the other side of the state.
In Massachusetts, there's Somerville, too.
Yeah, it's all weird. But the New York Times did like one of these living here type articles where they just sort of drop a reporter in, I guess, to write about the community. And which is fine. They've been doing those for 100 years. But for some reason, and maybe I need therapy, I was bothered by how people in our social network, only on Facebook, I mean, like people from Somers and that we sort of maybe tangentially knew, gushed over this article.
Oh, yeah, I read it. I saw it on the Somers Record.
Everybody was just like, this is so wonderful. It was just like all pink cloud and puppy dogs. And I don't know, I got a little resentful. But that's my own thing. But you guys live in Somers, in the town where we grew up. I'm just wondering what you guys thought of the article. I mean, I should just give people a taste of what we're talking about here. The headline, it's living in Somers, New York, a close-knit town with plenty of shopping and great parks. Residents enjoy the largely unspoiled character of its setting, as well as a good school system and a sense of history. And then they got a picture of the Elephant Hotel, which is the locally famous town hall there. And then it begins. Back in 1996, Michael, how do you say that name? Chaffee?
Chaffee?
I don't know. And his fellow kindergartners took an apple-picking field trip to Stewart's Fruit Farm in Somers, New York. Little did he know that 22 years later, he and his wife, Emily, would purchase their first house together just a half-mile from the farm. And then it mentions later, in a highest and best competition with two other bidders, they paid $560,000, $10,000 over the asking price.
Oh my God.
I was thinking that he can afford that at that age. I can't afford that now.
Right, yeah, I can't afford. I'm 44. There's no way I could afford that. I'm underwater in my mortgage. But they work.
The only reason I even have a house in Somers is because I inherited it. It's not because I bought it.
That's right.
Me
yeah.
too.
Same thing with Brian there. And so, but they both work as electrical engineers at Indian Point, which I thought was closing. So I don't know how. Hopefully they.
They better make all that money right now.
So the gist of the article is sort of like how wonderful Somers is, and
block parties. That's what they said we have block parties. When? I've never had a block party.
Yeah, what did you guys think, Shannon? What did you read it? Were you kind of
I read
immediately? It. Okay, go ahead. Tell me what you thought.
Well, first of all, I'm still living in Somers, so I'm a little worried, but about what I might say, that it might come back to haunt me, that my house might get egged next Halloween. I felt like.
Does that still happen? Like, do people still egg? Like, Shenorock used to be the bad. That was a tough place to go at Halloween back in the day.
I think so, but not on my. But we're like the weird people on the block that people stay away from. So
nice.
Not my house. They think that we're witches and stuff. So, because none of us are married and we have 1 million dogs, so they kind of stay away. So I probably won't have a problem. But I kind of felt like it was shallow, like it was trying to make something. For me, my experience in Somers has not been great. I mean, as an adult, it's been fine, but as a child, it wasn't. I didn't feel it was a good place to grow up. I didn't feel included. I felt like if you didn't have money and you didn't have status, I just felt like it wasn't an inclusive community. When he says it's close knit, I kind of don't feel that. I don't feel like my family and I have never really, I'm not the word I'm looking for. We've never really mixed well with Somers. Even now, we kind of keep to ourselves.
It was interesting. It sort of presents this. It doesn't come out and say, "Hey, this is a really rich lily white community."
Yeah,
but
exactly.
But the article kind of does say that. It was kind of like off-putting to me. Hey, we got great shopping, and great shopping.
What shopping do we have?
I guess we got
There's
supermarkets.
nothing in Somers proper. Like,
know.
you don't shop, you go to Katona, you go to Yorktown, you go to, I mean, I guess there's some overpriced stores, grocery store coming in now, but, I mean, we had a Gristedes.
Well, Stop and
shopping
Shop.
cen- you know.
Stop and Shop is part of
I mean,
Somers.
again, it's part, I guess so, that whole ball
Yeah,
won't
but
play. But again,
Stop and Shop
it's
is
not known-
everywhere. Yeah, it's not like, hey,
I've never thought of, like, great shopping as the Stop and Shop, and then I'll go
Yeah.
hit the home place or whatever.
or I'm
that
gonna
home
buy a house on the hey, they got a Stop and Shop there. I think
Yeah,
they got
exactly.
Peapod too.
Well, I think
And
of shopping as
parts,
like clothing
really-
and stuff, not food.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was.
I
a
mean,
weird
I
one.
actually, full disclusure, guys, I didn't read the article. It's sort of
Well,
like
I told you we were
Bird
going to be talking about it. Would it kill you
Box.
to?
It's like but it's like Bird Box. Everyone's telling me to watch that. Everyone's telling me to read about this town that I live in. I live here. I don't know. Like, it just didn't make sense to. It's like propaganda. Of course, they're going to say live in Somers. That everyone. I guess if you're going to rate it on some type of index, sure, it's probably a nice community to live in.
I saw some people saying I don't know who it was on one of those Somers Facebook community pages. I mean, every community now has their volunteer-run sort of insane local community page, and somebody on there was saying it's becoming a city, because it was interesting to.
I saw that. I almost responded, but I already got into trouble for responding to another comment, the Confederate. I got into a big thing with somebody, and he was actually calling my house and being psycho. So I was like, "Don't respond."
Oh, that's weird. Yeah, you can't be too careful nowadays.
Yeah.
But I mean, I guess because we grew up there, and now we're old, and the Somers that we knew as kids, especially the three of us, because Shannon lives in Shenorock, Brian and I grew up in Lake Lincolndale, and Shenorock and Lake Lincolndale are sort of next to each other in a weird way, separated by woods and old train tracks.
Pipeline. The old pipeline.
A gas pipeline and utility
And we
wires.
were the working class. We were the working
I was gonna
class.
say, we were
section of
blue-
town.
like-
we were the
blue
poor
collar.
parts. We were the poor parts of we were the poor parts of
When I
Somers. The poorest
When I
was Lake
describe-
Lincolndale and
When I describe
Shenorock.
when I describe to people where I live, I tell them I live in the ghetto of Somers.
Yeah. I've heard it said Shenorock is the ghetto of Somers.
Now,
I've heard that said.
When I worked at the Pat and Trader, a weekly newspaper that used to exist in Mount Kisco, the Somers Reporter, we would refer, me and him, to Shenorock as the murder capital of northern Westchester, because every couple of years there'd be some insane
Back
shooting.
then, yeah, in the 90s, we had several in Shenorock, and I don't think anything since then. I don't think we've had any murders in Somers since then. So I think it's been about an 18-year streak.
Let's knock on wood. But it's weird from my perspective.
Yet.
Right, yeah. I didn't realize I grew up in the poor part of town until Mr. Bickle told me in economics in 11th grade, where he referred to, he goes, "Oh yeah, you're Lake Lincoln, that's the ghetto of Somers." I was like, "What?
Yeah.
Really?" I just had no idea. I didn't really.
I was having it said to me in 6th grade. Actually, I go through that in the playground. People were telling me I was poor. I didn't know I was poor until it was pointed out to me.
And so it's weird to read this sort of homogenous article where the entire town is just painted with this sort of, rich guy brush without coming out and saying it. When I never felt that. If you're going to do an article, just do it on Lake Lincolndale or just do it on Shenorock. And
It was phony.
Yeah, it's
But I
like
also
you
think
can't
it
paint up.
is.
Saying,
It
wait, you talked
is.
over me.
All right.
Go ahead.
But I just think it is that now. It was like my community now is not as blue collar as it once was, and I brought this up before with you, Eugene. It's like we have a lake community here. We actually have a lake. I believe Shenorock's lake is closed due to sewage and whatever other chemical or toxic Avenger type stuff there
The
is.
Toxic Avenger is coming out of there soon.
But-
Geez, you're really tearing down the stereotype there, Brian. Thanks.
But like
You're bringing
what I
Shannon
mean
back
is-
to 3rd grade here.
But back then, like for instance, the lake community here, I never saw a father at the lake. Nowadays, you have a father. The fathers are there, the weekends, during the week, the parents are there. It wasn't like that growing up. Maybe we did live in a different era. Like you went out when it was daylight, you came home when it was dark. Now, kids don't go out; they just stay on their computers and. We evidently get all our news from Facebook, but it just seemed like, I don't think it's a working class community anymore. I do
No.
think all of this article is correct in 2018. Now, being the guy that lives alone and is single in a house that he should be, with I'm like the only single weird guy in my neighborhood that's not been divorced,
We have that in
it's a
common.
weird community to live in, but I do think it's...
Wait, let me just stop you.
That,
when you say it's a weird community to live in, you mean based on the fact that you're unmarried in a bedroom community, you mean?
yeah.
It's basically Somers is a New
yeah.
York City bedroom community, right? Everyone sort of still works in the city, right?
It still works in the city, but I also think even nowadays, it's not as working class anymore.
It's not the cops going to the city and the firemen.
Yeah,
anymore.
it's not like a plumber going somewhere. It's not like, everyone has a, I don't know, they sell something on the computer where they can work. They wear casual pants on Fridays now.
What about
So
you,
I
Shannon?
just-
Brian had said. Well, Brian, is that what you were saying, that it's like being single in Somers is a weird thing now, or
Yes.
Well, I mean,
You stick out
definitely
like
that.
a sore thumb. You're the weird person.
because you're all
You're-
right?
Well, yeah,
Because everybody's got like the SUV with the stickers on the back with the dog and whatever. And Brian's got
it's like
dead bodies in his
didn't
car.
fulfill our destiny to breed. And at this point, for me anyway, it seems unlikely. But it's funny. I was just thinking, as you said that both Brian and I are very creative and have had a lot of. We've produced a lot of creative. Him with his movies, me with my books. I wonder if that would have happened had we been married.
Hey, this is Eugene, most likely interrupting myself to bring you a word from our sponsor, valleygivesback.org. What will you be remembered for? Name a Valley nonprofit in your estate plan and create a legacy that tells future generations what matter to you. Making a gift that costs nothing during your lifetime is easy and revocable if things change. With a planned gift, you have the power to impact the Valley forever without affecting your current lifestyle. Your action inspires others to make a difference in their own way. Remember the Valley. Ask your accountant, financial planner, or attorney about planned giving options. Plan now. Give later. Impact tomorrow. Learn more at valleygivesback.org.
Soon.
What about you, Shannon? You ever thought of getting whatever? I don't know. Where do people move?
I've always felt like I've been trapped in this town. Like my family was working class. They had a hard time making ends meet. So once I graduated from high school, I started working and contributing to the mortgage and contributing to the bills.
What'd your parents do? What'd your dad do for a living? What'd your mom do?
My father, his last job was his last real job was he was head of night security at Lincoln Hall.
Oh, sure. Okay. That's a juvenile. Yeah. At the time, it was a juvenile detention facility in Somers. I don't know what it is right now.
No list that is in Somers, which I think is hilarious.
Yeah, that doesn't make it into the New York Times.
We
but
have
anyway.
a boys' home here.
Yeah, they didn't mention that.
Right.
Well, right now, it's used to being held children that were separated from their parents. And my mother was a nurse's aide, and she was at the time your father was the head of that nursing home. She was in that nursing home. In fact, she had a lot of respect for your father. And whenever I had a problem, she was always like, "Tell Mike Driscoll, give Mike Driscoll a call. He'll do something about it."
Oh, that's good to hear.
Yeah. So, and then my mother was always a nurse's aide. In fact, when she died last year, she died a week after her last patient did. She was a home health aide, and he was 102 years old, and he died January 2nd. She died January 9th.
Wow.
Yeah. But that's always what they did, and they were always kind of dependent. I mean, they didn't make the kind of money that people in Somers made, so they were kind of always dependent on their kids to bring in money, and they came from a neighborhood where that was expected. Like, it's funny because parents today, they act like, the kids are the center of their world. My parents, they were the center of their own world, and the kids were supposed to be contributing. Like, it was totally a different outlook. Like, we were supposed to be bringing in money and helping them. So
it was an old world thing, right?
Yes.
What was your dad was Irish, right? Was he he was
Yep.
from Ireland? He off the boat?
Not
No?
right from Ireland.
Okay.
No, we were from Charlestown originally in Boston, and Charlestown is an Irish. I don't like to use the word ghetto, but it was at that time. There was a lot of the Irish immigrants came, they settled there, they stayed there. My family had been there for 150 years when they moved. So they never really lost that old world outlook. But yeah, so that what ended up happening is then in my 20s, my father got sick with cancer, and he was sick for years, and it was like, it kind of snuck up on me that I kind of got stuck here. And
Although
then he died,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
and then, I had to contribute to the bills for that, so yeah.
And having a house in Somers isn't a bad thing, we should say. It's not a bad investment
No.
where you guys live. Because one thing that made me laugh in this New York Times article, they sort of went over the price range, and they said something like, you can get a house for $200,000. And
I
so
said,
I'm
where?
like, what? It's like, what? I was like, where
Well,
my
it
parents...
could be mine. It probably is mine, and it has a hole in the roof. It has, like a draft in the back door.
In Somers, New York,
Our do-it-yourself renovated bathroom. Yeah.
You can get a
you
locker
buy
room
it for $200, but then you double it and triple in size and sell it for $8.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, that's a house you're gonna flip. You know what I mean? Like, it's not a house you're gonna move into.
We have homes from $200,000 up to $2 million. Okay, that's it. That's from a realtor there in Somers. The other thing that I thought the article lacks, and I guess in my opinion, and I don't really have any proof of this other than just the feeling, these in living articles are just, newspapers need realtors. They need real estate advertising. Especially to appeal to Manhattan folks who read the New York Times at a greater concentration than anybody else on planet Earth, or Brooklyn types, which is, of course, growing and more wealthy. And Westchester's the first place you go. So Somers is sort of off the beaten path compared to some of the other communities, like a Chappaqua or something like that. Mm-hmm. So this is basically an advertisement, this article. And I think it's sort of funny to be not a victim of it, but just sort of read this sort of BS whitewash of Somers. But I understand why they did it. But they don't touch upon, like I said, they don't touch upon the struggle that Somers had, that every single Somers article in the North County News when we were growing up was about. And I remember it as a kid. They would always say Somers was trying to, quote, maintain its rural character, unquote. That was happening all the time. And then they just mention as an aside in the article, there's some of these developments like the Preserve, which, I mean, I was a reporter in Somers when they were building that thing. Not in Somers, but in the area. And Shannon, you live next to the Preserve. I mean, that thing is disgusting. It's just horrible.
Can I tell you, those houses, we have 3 houses breathing right down on us that I could pick up a rock and hit the property. Those houses were put up literally over a weekend.
And it's just like, and for people who have no idea what we're talking about, you have like this it was a former summer community, Shenorock, right? So you got houses close together, smaller houses, sort of like around
cottages,
here.
yeah.
Yeah, they were cottages, yeah, exactly, on a quarter acre, a lot of them, 2, 3 bedroom, 3 bedroom at the most, mostly 1 baths. And then next to it, you had woods for the longest time. And that's where like Brian and I and everybody from Shenorock and Lake Louis, that's where we grew up.
It was like called 9 acres. You'd ride motorcycles. 9 acres or
10 acres?
9 acres. Definitely 9 acres.
It was called 9 acres.
And those were dumping grounds. Those were town dumps. Yeah. They were unofficial dumps where I remember crawling into cars and refrigerators as a kid. It was very Stand By Me-ish.
It was very cool.
Then they came in and just developed it all into big mansions. And the monstrosity, the most offensive one is definitely the Preserve, because they also put up a water tower that I can see from my parents' house.
Really took my nephew the other day. We went for a walk down the pipeline. And what was weird is, again,
how do you even get in there now without getting arrested?
Well, I mean, that's the weird part, taking a 5-year-old. He's like, can we get arrested for this? I'm like, yeah, we could. The weird part was what used to be this mecca of woods. Literally, we could stand on the road from where it used to be like the wilderness, like kind of like you said, like a Stand By Me experience. What to go to these old railroad tracks I thought would take hours. I literally could stand on the side of the road, still see those tracks now. And what was even weirder is now you see these big McMansions. Literally, like where.
So that's what is that
like close?
What does that feel like when you look at that, though? Because as our kids, that was our expanse. That was our wilderness.
Well, let me tell you, They put a gate across the end of my road. They extended the road into the preserve, then put a gate across it.
Well,
So
you
that
got
we
to keep
couldn't get in there.
You got to keep Shutter Rock out.
Yes, exactly. So we couldn't get in there. No.
Is it armed? Is it like has Trump showed up to put anything there?
Not as yet, but I will tell you that I walked my boyfriend's dog in there around the water tower area because they left the gate open, and I noticed that afternoon
so angry,
it was
she had
locked
the dog
up
go
again.
pee on it all the time.
Padlocks.
Oh, they knew you got through. You probably set off a
Maybe
sensor.
there's a camera or something in there.
You got to keep the Rock out. So it's like, Shannon, like growing up in the Rock, like because when me and Brian were in Lake Lincolndale, there was a weird generational thing happening, or maybe me and Brian were just jerks because we only hung out with me and Brian. You know what I mean? There were other kids in the neighborhood, but it was just me and Brian mostly. But the Rock had,
you didn't hang out with the other kids on the other side of the lake because it was too far, and you didn't hang out with the kids on the other side of the hill. It was we were the two of our age group. You know what I mean? Like it was definitely like.
It was kind of weird though, looking
cliques.
back, don't you think? Though, like we didn't like. Why do we hang out with the kids on the other side of the hill?
I was the only kid my age in my neighborhood, and I ended up hanging out with kids that were like 4 years younger than me, which was like totally shameful. Like I think almost now it's almost like a normal thing, but back then it was like you're too old to be hanging out with them, you know. But I did it anyway because there was no one to hang out with.
And then obviously just like transitioning here into some of the books you've written over the years. The Playground was the first one, right? And that's literally taken from the Playground. But Primrose at
Somers Intermediate School, yes. It still looks exactly the same. If you're passing Somers Intermediate School and you look at that playground, it looks exactly the same. Everything else has changed. The school is bigger, both the schools have changed, and there's more parking lots, of course, but that area looks exactly the same.
And so give us a synopsis of the book. I mean, you recount being bullied horribly by our fellow classmates.
Yes, in 6th grade. And it's funny because I remember that when I
in 6th grade. Okay, sorry. So that's the other side of town, right? That's the intermediate school then?
Yeah, it was the intermediate school.
Okay.
In 6th grade, I had an awful, horrible year. It was to the point that, like, I'm trying to articulate this. Bullying was looked at differently in the 80s. Now it's looked at, well, if your kid is bullying someone, there is something wrong with you as a parent, and there's something wrong with your kid. Back then it was looked at, if this kid is being bullied, there's something wrong with that kid. There's a reason why all these kids are picking on that kid. So I was traumatized twice. Not only was I traumatized by the fact that all these kids were picking on me, I was also traumatized by the adults around me acting like there was something wrong with me.
And who were the adults, like the teachers and things like that, the people that were supposed to be protecting you?
That really, I mean, I think I've carried that with me forever.
Well, you still there?
Yeah.
I think we just lost Shannon.
No, I hear.
All right, Shannon, I apologize. As you
That's
started
fine.
talking, I dropped out of the call somehow, or Mark Zuckerberg got my freaking email and hacked me.
All the Somers people didn't like what I was saying.
Yeah, right? The intermediate school. But like 6th grade, I remember like 6th grade was such a, man, I don't want to do that again. Like that's the worst thing about having I have a son now, and he's 7, or no, he's 8. And he's not into sports. He's more timid. Like I was sort of raised by wolves because I was the youngest of 5 boys. Like I was an egomaniac with no self-esteem. Like I had no upper body strength, but I thought I could beat anybody up. You know what I mean? And I look back and I'm like, oh, I'm glad I was like that because at least I would swing at somebody. But I'm dreading my kid as he goes through something like 6th grade. So, are you involved now in how does that bullying affect you today? And how did writing the book help you in any way? Or
I connected my bullying experiences. I have a pattern of getting involved with abusive men, and it took me a while to see that. It took me many years to actually see that I was actually seeking out my bully. I was trying to win over my bullies by getting these men. I am drawn to men that remind me of the boys that bullied me.
And it was mostly boys that bullied you, like in the.
It was mostly boys.
Okay.
In fact, yeah. It was boys in the class that bullied me. which is actually, I know at the time they seemed to think that that was like strange, but I've read up on the topic. It really isn't that strange. That it actually says, what I've read on the topic is a lot of times it'll happen if a boy has a crush on a girl and it's pointed out to the rest of the class by the teacher, that he might start bullying the girl because he's embarrassed.
Right, yeah, and he strikes out, yeah.
Yeah, and it's in there, and boys are at an age where they're starting to have a sexual awakening, and they feel guilt about that.
Yeah, Jesus, I think back to sixth grade. It's just like, ugh, God, I would never want to do that again.
Yeah, and to have the whole class know that you might be having those feelings towards someone, it's just such humiliating for the boy that it may trigger bullying, and I feel that's what happened in this case, and So one of my messages is that adults are the most important resource when a child is being bullied. It's the adults and the way they react to it that really makes the difference.
How could adults have reacted differently? Like how ideally, and I'm sort of asking this as advice, like if my kid gets bullied at school, how should I react as a father?
Take them away from the bullies. It's funny because it's come up. My boss actually asked me. He doesn't agree with me. He still is in the philosophy like a Christmas Story where the kid raises up and beats up the bully. He's
fantasy. That's fantasy.
Yes,
yeah.
He's still in that. Well, this is what should happen to stop the bullying. No, I think the best thing is to remove your child from the bully. I mean, whatever way. I think the best thing for me would be for me to have been removed from that classroom. I wouldn't have liked it. Let me tell you, I would not have liked that. But it would have been the best thing. I mean, in adults, a lot of times you have to realize that you have to make the best decision for your child. It may not be something your child likes. I mean, I don't have children, so it's easy for me to say. But
and what about teachers? Like, how should they have? I mean, like
separate.
Okay.
Like in my situation, really there should not have been, you had those open classrooms, remember?
Yeah, we should, for anyone listening, we went to looking back, we went to Somers Intermediate School, which didn't have walls in the classrooms. It was like some type of hippy-dippy theory at the time, I guess in the 80s. Classrooms without walls. So we just had bookshelves, and you could see into the next class, and then we had a common area. It was basically like one giant, enormous room divided into 6 or 7 classrooms, and that was the 5th grade. It was a weird setup.
Yeah. So with that setup, what would happen, and I've actually had other students in my class mention this also, you had certain teachers that would just take off for periods of time and leave their class unattended because you had a teacher on one side and you're teaching the other side. Your kids aren't really unattended. There's teachers right there with them in the room, but the teachers aren't paying attention. They're paying attention to their own class. So in my situation, I think that contributed a lot to the bullying because a lot of it took place when the teacher was out of the room.
So just supervision,
Yeah, she was leaving the room a lot. And God, I feel like she's going to call me after this. She was leaving the room a lot, and she was leaving the room unattended. And that's when a lot of the bullying was taking place. And so I think she knew that on some level, and she knew she was to blame, so that she began to resent me because it was almost like I was telling on her, even though I wasn't. And I think that just what led to just an awful situation that should really not have happened.
And hopefully, I mean, from what little I've experienced talking to like my kids' school about certain things, I think at least, at face value, the professionals in the building take it much more seriously than they did.
Yeah.
And that's all because of, these school shootings, Columbine and all the things that have happened where suddenly a student's mental health and his sort of standing in the community, there's much more talk about school community now, which was never a thing when we were kids, is just sort of at the forefront now, and hopefully it is working. But
yeah, there's a lot more supervision these days than there was when we were kids. There always is a parent there or a teacher there.
I went to my my nephew's classroom 2 weeks ago, and there's like 8 teachers in the classroom now.
Well, a lot of that is because now special education, when we were kids, if you were in special education, you were just ostracized from the mainstream kids, and that's not right. Now the thing is, if you're blind, literally blind, you are in a classroom with other kids, and you might have a paraprofessional, a teacher's assistant there to help you, which is, I mean, one thing that happens here in where we are in the lower Naugatuck Valley, we're a poor area. I live in Derby, and the city next door is Ansonia, and basically we're like Peekskill. We have high poverty rates, a decently high crime rate for our population. We've got issues. We're among the most distressed cities in the state of Connecticut. And you'll hear sometimes the school board people complain about special education costs and all this, and it's just something I'm always wary of from growing up and seeing kids ostracized. And I'm going off on a tangent, but if there's one bill I'm not like, I don't mind paying. It's if my taxes go to get kids educated in a regular classroom, I'm all for that. All right, let's wrap this one up.
Okay.
All right, I want to thank you guys for coming on the Valley Indy podcast, and hopefully I don't get the office burned down for taking an hour to just talk about my high school experiences.
It's very cathartic.
Yeah, for us, but maybe not for listeners.
Yeah. I think they probably
can relate. 'Cause they have
yeah.
the same story, just it's just a different name of the road or a different store.
Yeah. All right, see ya.
For hundreds of years we brought you the news.